And we begin tonight with the United States Supreme Court, the 9 individuals with lifetime appointments to the highest law-giving body in the nation, who have the power to determine whether you can or cannot make decisions about your own body, or whether you can or cannot legally marry your partner. The 9 individuals whose literal job it is to make rules that every single American must abide by. Those same people have decided, apparently, that they don't need any rules for themselves. Earlier today, Senate Democrats at a Judiciary Committee hearing made the case for Supreme Court ethics reform, calling for a code of conduct that justices must follow, which is basically just the bare minimum. Committee Chair and Senator Dick Durbin even pointed out that right now, ethical standards for Supreme Court justices are actually lower than they are for local city council members.
Ethics cannot simply be left to the discretion of the nation's highest court. The court should have a code of conduct with clear and enforceable rules, so both justices and the American people know when conduct crosses the line. The highest court in the land should not have the lowest ethical standards. That reality is driving a crisis in public confidence in the Supreme Court. The status quo must change.
Not a single Supreme Court justice was in attendance, by the way. Chief Justice John Roberts snubbed the invite from Senator Durbin last week, offering instead a statement signed by all the justices in which they reaffirm and restate foundational ethics principles and practices to which they abide. Seriously. But let's just take a look at where those principles and practices have got us thus far, shall we? ProPublica revealed that Justice Clarence Thomas has failed to disclose luxury trips and private jet travel over the course of 2 decades, gifted to him by wealthy Republican donor and Nazi paraphernalia collector Harlan Crow. He also conveniently failed to disclose that Crow even bought Thomas's mother a house. There's also Justice Neil Gorsuch. According to Politico, 9 days after joining the bench, Gorsuch sold a property that he owned to the head of a major law firm that would go on to be involved in 22 cases before the High Court. And then you have Chief Justice John Roberts. Insiders reporting that Roberts' wife made over $10 million working as a recruiter for law firms who regularly appeared before the court. None of this was previously disclosed. And what the Senate is proposing in response to these efforts isn't some wild, far-reaching concept. It's actually pretty standard practice. Independent Senator Angus King and Republican Lisa Murkowski introduced legislation last week that would force the court to create a binding code of conduct and appoint an ethics officer to oversee it, while a separate bill proposed by Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse would require the justices to adopt and follow an ethics code, impose standards for disclosing travel and gifts in line with rules for members of Congress, and create an investigative board to review complaints against justices. Essentially, just holding these 9 justices to the same standard as every single lower federal court judge in the country. It shouldn't be that hard. But without 10 Republicans on that board, the legislation cannot pass, which means unless the Supreme Court decides to implement an ethics policy upon itself, they can and will keep getting away with it. Joining me now is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a member of the Judiciary Committee, who was at that hearing today. And, Senator, thank you so much for being here. I didn't even mention Ginni Thomas. You know, there is the ongoing scandal of what she was doing in terms of insurrection and Harlan Crow funding her organizations. But you're because Dianne Feinstein isn't there, this is an evenly divided panel.
Correct.
In your mind, what got done today and what can get done unless that configuration changes?
What got done today was that a lot of light was brought onto the problem of a Supreme Court that refuses to abide by the code of conduct that applies to all of the federal judges.
Yep.
That has no entity to investigate or check or do fact-finding or reach conclusions. So they basically call their own fouls.
Yep.
And you can imagine how well that works.
Yeah.
And they get to make up the terms of the rules that they live under, which end up being very different from what regular judges with a real process actually live under.
Some of the conduct that we've seen, including Clarence Thomas, not disclosing that Harlan Crow bought his mother's home and she still lives in it, doesn't pay any rent. Some of that seems like it also potentially could be criminal. Has there been any noise out of the Justice Department to say maybe they ought to start looking into it if there's nothing that the justices are willing to do to change their own behavior?
There has not. What has happened is that the disclosure questions regarding Clarence Clarence Thomas have been sent by the Judicial Conference, which is the top administrative body of the courts, down to their so-called Financial Disclosure Committee, which then makes a recommendation as to whether to refer that matter to the Justice Department if there is reasonable cause to believe that Justice Thomas's failure to disclose might have been willful. So it could get to the department through that willfulness referral, and we'll be watching to see what happens, because the last time that happens, it seems to have died in the Financial Disclosure Committee.
There seems to just be a sense of stasis, right? That they refuse. I mean, that letter was fairly arrogant, I will just say, as a layperson, from the Supreme Court Chief Justice, essentially saying, no thanks, we don't need your help, we're good, we don't have any ethical issues. But their approval ratings are in the basement. Right? They've dropped, 30 some odd points over the last 20 years. People don't trust them, and no one believes that they're not just politicians. I mean, you actually, let me play you to you. This is you, Senator Whitehouse, questioning Chief Justice Gorsuch. This was back in 2017. Take a listen.
My question is, do you think there's a public interest
and Senator,
in disclosure of political funds in a democracy? That's, I don't think, a prejudgment. That's just a values proposition, and one of the considerations that you ought to be able to answer without much hesitation.
And Senator, what I'm prepared to say is I recognize that as a matter of First Amendment interests, the Supreme Court has validated the proposition that disclosure serves important functions in a democracy. At the same time, the Supreme Court's also acknowledged that those disclosure functions can sometimes themselves have unintended consequences.
You know, there's a sense that, number one, you can't believe anything that they said in their hearings. I'm sorry to say, because they also said things about stare decisis that turned out to be lies.
Remember what they said about Roe versus Wade.
What they said about Roe versus Wade. It's a settled law. It's settled law. But it also seems to me that at least the conservative majority, they act like little princes. Like they can take money and trips and whatever they want. There's nothing the rest of us can do about it, and yet we're expected to abide by their rulings, right? There's an asymmetry here.
Yeah,
it's
a one-way street.
It's a one-way street. Let's talk about the money. You talk a lot about this. The Leonard Leo money. Yeah. The new disclosures that it's not even clear that he didn't pick those justices that Donald Trump added to the court, the Trump 3, without the help of the Federalist Society, who we've all sort of come to think of the Federalist Society is serving up these justices, and they're just getting on the bench. Now it's even murkier.
Yeah, it's much murkier. I mean, it's a little hard to pick apart because Leonard Leo worked for the Federalist Society and still serves on their board of the Federalist Society. But what is clear is that the Federalist Society had no proceedings through which they adopted or approved any such list. Right. So if they didn't look at it, what's this Federalist Society list? Who did come up with it? I think that's an important question, because if it is a bunch of right-wing billionaires operating in a back room at the Federalist Society with Leonard Leo as their little functionary, then that's a really important consideration in evaluating these justices.
It's hard for me to sort of wrap my mind around the idea that you have potentially billionaires who are essentially deciding who's in the Supreme Court majority, buying their way into a kind of power that we can't regulate, in which they get to decide things like burdens of taxation, which weirdly enough, always turn out to be very low on the very rich, or regulation, which somehow always goes in the way of the super rich. And all the rules seem to always go in one direction. Yeah. And it's in terms of the elite.
Statistically demonstrable which way the decisions lean of this court. And when you think of that, the $580 million you mentioned that they burned setting up this operation, and even the $1.6 billion that they gave Leonard Leo as his little reward for his slush fund, that's chump change. Yeah. Compared to how much they make off of continuing to pollute for free, for instance, by stopping climate regulations.
And also, they seem to be very clearly getting political goals ticked off. There has been a desire to overturn Roe versus Wade since, the late 1970s, 73 when it passed, till shortly after that. They've gotten that, check. Yeah. They want deregulation, check. Yeah. Everything they want that the far right sort of Christian minority wants, check, 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 check. So it seems to me that if they're just another political body, why shouldn't they be regulated the way you all are regulated?
Yeah. Or like the judges are regulated. We're not asking much. We're asking that they be regulated in their ethics behavior the exact way that the rest of the federal bench is already regulated.
Is the only way to fix this to expand the court?
I think there are a lot of ways to fix this, and one of them is to pass a law that requires them to put in place a proper ethics infrastructure and bring a lot more transparency to the court. I have a bill that would put them under term limits.
I was going to mention that.
And that, I think, is an important way to regularize the process of replacing the judges.
Yeah.
So you don't get these political moments where Justice Kennedy is in touch with the Trump administration about resigning and trying to figure out how to get Kavanaugh on as his replacement. And
right.
all that political murk
really
does not belong around a judicial appointment. Set aside Leonard Leo and his billionaires.
And then somehow